Um, Hello, greetings loved ones. Paisley Parvati Devi here with our weekly yoga philosophy share. If you're just joining us for the first time today, every single week on Tuesday I go live with a reading from this book, the Yamas and Niyamas, Exploring Yoga's Ethical Practice by Deborah Adele. I chose this book to share from because it is talking about the 10 philosophical precepts or tenets, 10 guidelines for living a life that is well lived in general, living a life that is full of love and prosperity and hope and bliss and peacefulness, ultimately cultivating this feeling of inner peace inside of ourselves. And so we have these 10 precepts in order to live that type of life, and it comes to us from this ancient Indian philosophy, the philosophy of yoga, right? Or the philosophy coming from the Vedas, which are some of the most ancient philosophical texts known to man, actually. And the author of this book, Deborah Adele, she really frames it well for a Western mind. So we have this ancient Eastern philosophical concept that is brought over into being framed for people who grew up in the West with a very different mindset. We tend to have a much more linear mindset here. So you may be asking yourself, okay, great, these are some tenets. What really does that mean? What are these yamas and niyamas? They sound kind of weird. So the yamas can be translated into the restraints or actions, behaviors to be restrained in order to help ourselves attain this life of inner peace and righteousness and bliss and peace among ourselves and peace with other people and with whatever situation is going on in the world. So those are the first 5 tenets, the yamas. The second 5 tenets, the niyamas, can be translated into observances. These are going to be actions and behaviors that we want to cultivate in order to live a life of inner peace and external peace. We are almost to the end of the book, you guys. I've been doing this for a whole year. This is our second time through the book together, and today we're actually starting the last chapter, which is the last of the niyamas. It's titled Ishvara Pranidhana, or Surrender to God. So if you're curious about previous videos in this series, we go through every single chapter together, and I will post a link to the playlist on YouTube and Facebook after I publish this video. If you want to see future videos with me, make sure that you give my page on Facebook a thumbs up, Live It to Yogini, join us on Patreon, and if you're watching on YouTube, then you can subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so that you can get notifications for future videos. Like I said, we're almost done with the book, you guys, but I'm gonna keep continuing on with new content. I'll move on to another project, another kind of yoga related or some kind of philosophical share that we can talk about at least once a week together. So I hope that you come along with me on that journey. And without further ado, let's start this chapter together. So Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to God, or surrender to the divine essence. What does that mean? In the movie Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, 2 con men find themselves in the same lucrative area. Realizing that there is room for only one of them, they make a wager, agreeing to pick an innocent woman and con her out of $50,000. The first one of them to succeed in obtaining the $50,000 will maintain sole rights to work the area. The other will leave, never to return. The wager unleashes a comical set of events, in which each con man tries to outdo the other. But the real surprise comes at the end, when it is the woman who swindles $50,000 from both of them. What is interesting to me are the reactions of these 2 men when they realize that all the time they thought they were doing the conning, in reality they were being conned. In a fit of anger, one of the men reacts with what looks like a 2-year-old tantrum. The other man, however, is very quiet and slowly begins to get a broad smile across his face. When he begins to laugh in delight at the mastery of this woman who has outsmarted him and walked off with his $50,000. There is a lesson for us here, I think. How often do we, like the men above, try to con life as if there's a prize waiting for us if we succeed, and when life doesn't do what we want, we throw a tantrum. Just think about how many times you tell yourself you had a bad day because it didn't go the way you had planned. We can be so busy feeling cheated or victimized when life doesn't go the way we want it to that we often miss a new opportunity life is offering us in the moment. Ishvara Pranidhana, the jewel of surrender, presupposes that there is a divine force at work in our lives. Whether we call it God, grace, providence, or life, this force is greater than we are and cares deeply about us. Surrender invites us to be active participants in our life, totally present and fluid with each moment, while appreciating the magnitude and mystery of what we are participating in. Ultimately, this guideline invites us to surrender our egos, open our hearts, and accept the higher purpose of our being. We have had tastes of this jewel of surrender. We know it as beginning in the flow. We know it as being in the flow or being in the zone. In the movie Bagger Vance, it is portrayed as your one perfect swing. Perhaps you were watching a sunset, hiking in the mountains, holding a baby, or you're caught up in something that you love to do when suddenly time disappeared and you disappeared with it. For me, that's drawing. So you're caught up in something and you're so focused, you're so into it because you're just purely enjoying it to the point where time disappears and you, what you know as yourself, right, the ego self, disappear with it. Your actions, your thoughts, and the activity that you are engaged in line up and become one entity of harmony and perfection. And actually, this could be a definition of what we know in yoga as samadhi. In Buddhism, it's otherwise known as nirvana or enlightenment in general. So this state of samadhi, this trance state, the state of yoga or union, literally means to become so entranced in the object of your meditation or concentration that there's no separation anymore between yourself, your ego, what you consider as you, and what you're focusing on, the object of concentration for meditation. So in the trance state of samadhi, the state of enlightenment, absorption, or oneness, or yoga literally means to yoke or to join. There is no difference between you and anything else and whatever object or anyone else, because you become enmeshed with it. That is what it means to be in the state of yoga. So your actions, your thoughts, and the activity you were engaged in lined up and become one entity of harmony and perfection. This is the rhythm of surrender. The yogis tell us that we can live this way all the time unless we are getting in our own way. Life wants to surprise, delight, and grow us in ways far beyond our imagination. Jean-Pierre de Casaude understood that the opportunity that hides in each moment. There is an opportunity that hides in each moment. In The Sacrament of the Present Moment, he writes about taking advantage of the immense, certain, and always available good fortune of every moment. He further states that there is a purpose hidden in each event, and if we trust this hidden purpose, life will always surpass our own expectations. De Casaude's writing overflows with the joy of trusting and finding God hidden within each activity, challenge, and interruption life presented to him. This reminds me of The Power of Now. Anyone familiar with that book by Eckhart Tolle? So he, in the opening to the book, describes this beautiful scenario. It's basically like how he became enlightened. He was lived a relatively normal life, and he became very depressed and just started to suffer greatly. It's just such deep suffering. And he describes this moment. He's lying in bed one night, just in this deep suffering and pain, he says to himself, I can't stand to live with myself anymore. I can't stand to be with myself anymore. And then he realizes, whoa, I can't stand myself? Are there two of me, or is there one of me? Who is the I that can't stand myself, right? Who is the self version of me, and who is this I version of me? And so that's the ego self versus the higher self, or the divine self. They all exist within every one of us, right? And at this moment of realization, self-realization, capital S, self, it's when we realize that we can become one with the I that can't stand myself, that's actually no different than who I actually am. The big I, the universal I, the divine nature that exists within every one of us. Hi Marco, thanks for stopping by. So The Power of Now is a great book. If anyone hasn't heard of it, I highly recommend. So the hidden power of the present moment. How do we begin to find this rhythm of surrender, or the immense joy and trust that overflows? When we release our rigidity and our need to control, when we joyfully engage life as it comes to us, and when we place our egos in devotion to that which is greater, we can begin to taste the bounty of this jewel. And again, the jewel is Ishvara Pranidhana, or surrender to the divine essence. The next part is titled Releasing. So the yoga posture called Shavasana, or corpse pose, is a posture for practicing surrender. Putting ourselves on our backs with our arms and legs stretched out at a 45-degree angle from the body signifies the death of the activity we have just participated in. And many of us who have taken a yoga class, especially in the beginning, you may remember a lot of people either love Shavasana, it's their favorite pose, they just want to stay there for the whole entire class, or they hate Shavasana. It's very painful, whether it be physically painful or just emotionally and mentally painful to just lay there and do nothing, because our society is so like go, 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 do more, be more. So a lot of people struggle to just lay there and just straight up do nothing in Shavasana or corpse pose. And then, you know, another just very human natural tendency is to be lazy and not want to move around a lot and push the body or push the mind past what is coming, you know, forthcoming without much effort. You know, it's a self-preservation, it's very human. So the other side of that is just wanting to lay in Shavasana and not do any of the more challenging poses. But the point is that we need both, right? We need balance in our life. So the yoga posture called Shavasana. Putting ourselves on our backs with our arms and legs stretched out at a 45-degree angle signifies the death of the activity we have just participated in, our yoga practice. It is also a practice for the ultimate surrender of our own death. In Shavasana, there is nothing for us to do. We are asked to just lie there, releasing any tension in our bodies, letting go of effort, and trusting that the breath will breathe us and the body will renew itself. If this sounds easy, it's not. This practice of Shavasana is one of the most important practices we can do, for it is here that we begin to learn the meaning of letting go of all the ways we physically and mentally fight with life. As we learn to stop fighting life, we can begin to act skillfully. When we learn to surrender, we can begin to act skillfully. Control makes us rigid and tight and narrows our perspective. Getting rid of our armor opens a world of possibility and makes us lighter and more comfortable for the journey. We can monitor our moment-to-moment surrender to life by watching the inner sensations of contraction and expansion. Contraction is a feeling of constriction, a pulling in. Expansion is an opening, a creating of space and wonder. When we find ourselves in contraction, we are fighting life or fearful of life. When we find ourselves in expansion, we are in the flow of surrender. So just noticing that, we've talked about this in some of the previous videos in this series, not to judge and say that it's right or wrong, but simply noticing, having the awareness of how certain external inputs, situations, other people, and internal inputs, your own thoughts, your own emotions that are happening within yourself, just taking note of how that impacts us, how we react to all of the stimulus, and then surrendering to it. If we're in a contracted state of feeling very like, this person said that thing and this thing is happening today and I'm so just nervous and scared and anxious and mad, you know, all these things, we're in this state of contraction, we're fighting life. Versus the state of expansion, relaxing, melting into life, just that deep breath and allowing the parasympathetic nervous system to kick in, allowing ourselves to breathe and go with the flow. And yes, realizing that, you know, sometimes life is difficult and things are challenging and make us nervous and worried, but ultimate trust and faith that whatever does come to us in life, we will never be given anything that we can't handle. You are so strong. And just knowing that whatever does come, even if it's hard, and maybe if you think you can't handle it, it's there for a reason. It's there for some learning, and it's there because you can handle it. So seeing the opportunity in all things, and when we come into the space of heart melting and opening, just allowing ourselves to expand and relax into whatever this newness, unknown, scary thing might be, it's so rewarding because it cracks us open, and then there's so much growth and room for newness and understanding and insight that we never would have let in. We can't let that in if we're in this state of clenching tightness, protecting ourselves, with our little turtle shells on. Then there's no room for this breaking open to happen. It can't happen, and we'll be safe, but there's comfort and safety, and then there's expansion and growth. And truly, when we allow ourselves to expand, we realize every time that we take that leap and go into the uncomfortable place and realize that we end up okay, we come out on the other side of it, then we become able to develop more and more trust in ourselves and know that it's okay to take that leap in the future. Okay, that was my little tangent on that. One more time. When we find ourselves in contraction, we are fighting life or fearful of life. When we find ourselves in expansion, we are in the flow of surrender. Doug Keller uses the imagery of ice chunks to help us grasp this concept of expansion and release. He likens life to a flowing stream, and we are ice chunks in that stream. We are the same quality as the stream, however, we are frozen in our tensions and fears. The practice is to melt ourselves into the flow of the stream, becoming one with the flow of life. As we relax and release our rigid thoughts and muscles, we can begin to flow with life. So the body is a mirror, right, for our mind. Emotions live in the body. Emotions can come from having a thought, which causes an emotion. Emotions can cause thoughts, and then the cycle just keeps looping. But ultimately, emotions come from storing past experiences and past pain in the body. So you might notice that there's a specific thing that always bothers you, no matter who says that thing. Maybe it's a specific word or phrase, no matter where it's coming from or the context that it's used in, it just always seems to bother you. And you might notice, oh, when I hear that word, my stomach just clenches up and my hands start to sweat and I just get shaky. I just get this feeling with it. And it may be a different feeling for you. Maybe it's not in your stomach, maybe it's more in your chest or in your shoulders. I don't know, it's different for each of us, but just having, again, this awareness to notice what comes up in my body. What does it feel like when I'm starting to get this triggered feeling, and then just melting into that. If we can train the body to relax and release, then we can train our minds to open up, and vice versa. The more open and relaxed the mind becomes, then so becomes the body. This is the purpose of yoga asana, or the postures in yoga. We start to become more flexible and strong in our muscles and in our body, and so our mind becomes flexible and strong at the same time. Our practice is to melt ourselves into the flow of the stream, becoming one with the flow of life. As we relax and release our rigid thoughts and muscles, we can begin to flow with life. When my granddaughter Ashley was a toddler, I used to tell her to be careful. In her delightful innocence, she mixed up the ending and would always cheerfully reply, "Be carefree." I thought this was really cute and began to playfully mimic her, but I noticed something important as I shifted my language. I noticed that being careful created tightness in me. Fear and rigidity accompanied these words. I also noticed that speaking the words "be carefree" brought an immediate feeling of expansion and opened me to the adventure of my life. I was ready to trust the moment. So a little bit about the importance of language. It is true. If you're constantly focusing on the bad and, oh, the weather is terrible, the news is terrible, and this pandemic's horrible, everything's wrong all the time, the what's wrong attention, then that's going to be the reality that is experienced. And not to say that all of this stuff isn't horrible and that there aren't negative repercussions that people have to deal with, because of course there are, but keeping all of our energy and focus on the negative isn't serving us, because energy follows attention. So if we're constantly focusing on the negative in our life, then we're going to attract more energy to wherever we have our attention and focus. So the opposite is also true. If you're looking for negative things or something to complain and be worried about, you're going to find it. I will guarantee you of that. Very easy to find. It's actually our nature, because it's self-preservation. But if you are looking for something positive, something to be grateful for, then I guarantee you that you can find that as well. It just takes a little bit more effort, especially if it seems like others around you are all also focusing on the what's wrong. But it's a proven fact that a gratitude practice increases well-being and mental health and happiness, contentment in general. So I encourage you, maybe we can just all take a moment right now, just think of 3 things right now that you're grateful right off the top of your head. I'm grateful for dogs and trees and clouds. There, easy, right? There's always something to be grateful for. Okay guys, so that's the first half of this chapter on surrender to the divine presence, and at the end of every chapter she offers a little bit of some reflection assignments. So I'm going to read the first 2 for you guys, and I invite you to just reflect on these for the next week, and then next Tuesday I'll hop on live again. We'll finish out this chapter, and then after that, you guys, we just have like I have a little integration or review summary planned, because we'll be at the end of the book. So I'll do one last video to kind of like summarize and tie it all together, put the cherry on top, and then we'll have our full series. Again, playlists on YouTube and Facebook. If you want the playlist link, feel free to message me. Otherwise, I'll post it in the comments in the description box too. Okay, so first assignment. This week, watch your attitude and responses to the moment. Are you fearful, trusting, fighting, judging, or annoyed? Notice if there is a pattern to your attitude. Interesting one. So again, not going too hyper-analytical with this. We're not trying to say, my attitude is right or wrong, just simply noticing. The first step is always just bringing the awareness to what it is, because if we have no awareness of something, then we can't possibly change or improve it. So we're just bringing awareness so that we can hopefully bring some improvements in the future. But never coming from a place of shaming ourselves or, looking for things that are bad about ourselves. That's all too easy to do. We're looking for areas of opportunity and improvement, not looking to kick ourselves, okay? And then the next assignment, this week, notice any tension that arises in your body when you need the moment to be your way. Consciously choose to relax your body and shift your attitude to curiosity. Notice what happens. Oh, I like these assignments for this week, you guys. So noticing what we were talking about in that last bit, the tightness and tension. If you really want something some way, or you're used to doing things a certain way and maybe have to compromise and you don't want to, just notice how that feels in your body. Just pay attention to it, and then see if you can consciously choose in that moment. No one's saying this is easy, you guys, but it'll be worth it if you can. Just try to consciously choose in that moment to relax your body. Deep breath. Just relax your belly muscles, relax your body, and just see if you can shift your mindset from one of like, no, you're wrong and I'm right and this is how we have to do it, to possibly being curious, just asking questions, well, why do you think it's important to do it that way? How do you think that I should do it? What would you recommend and why? Because, even if things don't make sense to us that other people are doing, it probably makes sense to them. They probably have a reason that they think is good for wanting to do things that way, whether or not we think it's good. Everyone has their own experience and perception, and they're all equally valid. Okay, you guys, so that's the end of the content for this week. If you have enjoyed these videos and want to go deeper with me into yoga philosophy, I would love to see you over on my Patreon page. For just $3.33 per month, you can join our community and unlock access to an archive of tons of awesome content related to yoga, Ayurveda, mindfulness, meditation, and healthy recipes, and red tent priestessing, and so much more. Otherwise, I love you all. I would love to hear your thoughts on the content, so feel free to reach out to me and share your reflection. Get your fingers moving in the comments. Okay? I love you, and I will talk to you soon. Peace.